Alexandrite System. Welcome to this interview. We are going to talk about plurality and autism today. I'm very excited and passionate about this topic myself, and I know you all are too. So I think it's super exciting that we're having this conversation together today. Do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, I am Claudia Alexandrite of the Alexandrite System. We are intra-community educators, content creators, psych students now. That's a new update since last time. Um, we are very passionate about the plural community and the intersections with plurality and other neurodivergencies and other identities.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I'm very excited about you all becoming psych students, and we can't wait to see where this will lead over time. That is incredible.
We're
Very
excited too.
excited for you all. Yeah, awesome. Do you maybe want to describe what you look like for our blind participants?
Yes, we are a white trans woman. We have half of our head shaved, the left side, and the right side is wavy, bordering on curly, long, but I actually have it in a ponytail right now. I'm wearing big headphones. I have a flower print button up that actually matches the curtains behind me. I'm wearing a Star of David, and I have glasses. I think I got everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we prepared some questions to go over today. So let's do it. So first, can you please share with us how you discovered the intersection between your autistic identity and your plurality? What was this journey like for you?
So we always say that it was more difficult for us to accept that we were autistic than it was for us to accept that we were plural. Um, it's hard to articulate why. I think, I guess for some reason, it was just like more of a disability, I guess, And the way that um, the way that we discovered our plural identity and the way we discovered our artistic identity are pretty much the same. We had a feeling about it for a long time, and then there was a breaking point where we did a bunch of research and finally made that uh, I don't know, that contact, that um, decision to try and start helping ourselves in a certain way with because with self-diagnosis we always say that it doesn't really matter exactly if you have the thing or not. If the coping mechanisms that work for people with autism help you, then you should be doing them. It doesn't matter if you actually are autistic or not, but that's kind of beside the point. Um, as for the intersection of it, uh, I think what made us really think about it a lot was uh, an issue I had in particular where this is still something I deal with more than a lot of people in the system, but I'm very light sensitive. Bright light, even kind of like mildly bright light, hurts my eyes a lot. I really can't go out in the day without sunglasses unless it's overcast. Other people in the system don't have that or don't have that to that degree. And there are other things where like only some of us have have issues where Camilla, and we tease her about this sometimes in a nice way. She is pretty face blind. She has a lot of difficulty telling people apart. She's gotten better over the years, but she's had some embarrassing moments where she thought some people were other people just because they looked vaguely similar. The intersection of our artistic identity and our plural identity both meet at the point of acceptance and um, loving ourselves because of or in spite of this neurodivergence that we're saddled with. And it's something that is difficult at times. Like being autistic sucks a lot of the time. it's difficult to interact with a neurotypical world as a neuroatypical person, but it's also enriched our lives in so many ways. Like, we would not be the same person, the same people that we are, uh, if we were neurotypical. We think in a different way. We interact with people in a different way. It's it's just different, and I do like that.
Thank you so much for sharing about your journey and your experience with discovering and the overlap between those two identities. Some of it is very recognizable. Um, we also discovered our plurality in the same way as we did our autistic identity. So,
Hmm.
thank you. My next question for you all is, in what ways do you think being autistic has influenced or shaped the dynamics within your system?
That is an interesting one. Shape the dynamics within our system. I think it helps us remember to be a little more understanding to each other when we learned how we communicate more and the way we think more. It became a lot easier for us to communicate and for us to understand how other people think a little bit more. So, for example, there's a famous experiment with autistic children where they have a scenario that they give to autistic children where this one fictional child has a ball and puts it into one cabinet, and then the second child comes in. The first child leaves. The second child comes in and moves the ball from one cabinet to another cabinet. And the question for the children is, where does the first child think that the ball is? And a lot of autistic children don't process that the information that they know isn't information that the other person knows. Um, and for a while, we were like, that's that feels very strange and very like unlike our own experiences. Like, to me, that makes sense. I can put myself in that person's shoes and empathize, or at least logically understand that. Meanwhile, I am having slight relationship issues with friends and with family where I don't realize that I'm not communicating things that I know that they don't know. Like, with some of our singlet friends, I was feeling like um, they weren't treating like me, Claudia, as my own person, weren't like addressing me by name necessarily, even though they are like very accepting of our plural identity. And then I realized like they can't usually tell a switch exactly, like most of them. Instead, I need to tell them who I am. Um, and so that is a roundabout way of saying that when we in the Alexandrite system communicate with each other, we need to understand sometimes, and we try and make an effort to understand sometimes where the other person is coming from and maybe what uh, they are thinking and feeling, but failing to tell us because it's just not aware to them. And sometimes that unfortunately goes both ways. And there is a frustrating conflict in that way. We've gotten better over the years. But I think our autism, funny enough, has really helped our internal communication.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. My next question is, many systems report a heightened sense of internal communication or understanding. Have you found that your autistic traits affect how your system communicates internally, and if so, how?
Yeah, as we were saying, that interpersonal method of way of communicating is different because of our own understanding of us being autistic.
My next question for you all is, could you discuss any challenges you have faced at the intersection of autism and plurality, especially in seeking understanding or support from others?
There is a subset of people who sort of dismiss your plurality if you also mention that you're autistic, uh, because there's like this, ongoing societal infantilization of autistic people that like we can never know what the hell we're talking about, like what we're about. We can't know our own internal self or selves, which is a really difficult thing. And so there are some people who will dismiss the idea of us actually being plural off the bat. Like it's something else. It's just a normal like mood thing, or like, everyone has different sides of themselves and you've like kind of taken it too literally, which is admittedly a very autistic thing. But it's it's very dismissive, which sucks. Um, Other difficulties that we've had at that intersection are having to find different ways for people to cope with difficulties that stem from autism. Um, our system kids a lot of the time have issues with sound, and some of them with touch, and it's difficult to occasionally it's difficult to remember which kid has the most difficulty with touch. We know like Clover in particular does not like to be touched, but we sometimes forget, like, okay, is Dandelion okay with touch, is Meadow okay with touch? And it's probably something we should have written down in our spreadsheet, to be honest, which saying that we have a spreadsheet makes me feel super autistic, to be honest. um, but yeah, it can just trying to remember the difficulties that each of us have, or the strengths that each of us have sometimes, where Camilla and I are more adept at public speaking than like Oak or Susan to a degree, or Audrey, where we need to remember sometimes that, like, if we are going to have somebody do something like this, we want to pull from the people we have the most experience, most strength with.
Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. Um, I don't have a spreadsheet, but I have a bullet journal.
Yeah, yeah. The organization, it feels good.
Right? Color coded. Gotta
Yeah,
keep track of everything. That's why I love Simply Plural so much.
yeah, yeah. The Amaryllis system did a great job with that.
Yeah, for sure. My next question is, from your perspective, what are some common misconceptions about the coexistence of autism and plurality that you'd like to address?
I think the biggest misconception is how common that intersection is. I don't have scientific data to back this up. There may have been studies that have been done, but right now the biggest studies about DID are all about like brain scans and DID, which is cool, but not really what I'm interested in personally. The only study that I've found that has taken any real uh, sample size or taken any real note about the intersection of plurality and autism is a philosophy paper that came out like a week ago, I think, and they had a very very small sample size because it's philosophy paper. It's more about like the idea of plurality and how that fits into society than you know a thorough research about plural people. But they mentioned that like a significant number of like the dozen or so plurals that they interviewed I identified as autistic. Um, Anecdotally, many systems that we know are autistic, um, or if they don't identify as autistic, they exhibit traits that we empathize with on specifically like related to our autism. Um, and I think that if you are going to make a space more plural friendly, you also need to make it more friendly to neurodivergent people in general, especially autistic people, because you are going to get a ton of overlap. Like, similarly, if you were going to make a plural friendly space, you need that space to be trans friendly. I would say the majority of systems have system members who are not the same gender as the body was assigned at birth. And, you need to accommodate for the fact that maybe somebody uh, doesn't identify as gender that they look like at that moment, and maybe that identity is fluid. But I think it's just a misconception that when you are dealing with someone who is plural, that is the only thing you really have to consider. You know?
Do you have any ideas on why if there is an overlap, which we have no scientific proof for, but we have also noticed in our work, in our personal life, in our friendship with other plurals, um, that there might be an overlap. So, if there is an overlap, do you have any ideas why that might be? Are a lot of plurals autistic, or are a lot of autistic people plural?
Yeah. See, that's kind of where I come in too, where like, or where I come down as well, where I think that the plurality and the autism kind of like feed back and forth, where I think that if we are looking at plurality from a trauma perspective, being an autistic person is a constantly traumatic experience, even if it's like very small traumas. It's the trauma of not being accepted, not being able to communicate what you need, the trauma of having your senses overwhelmed constantly. And similarly, because of the like not being accepted and social issues, I think autistic people are more likely to go through a traumatic interpersonal event, as broadly as that can be. On the other hand, I think that it may perhaps be like a cultural thing, or a thing where autistic people don't really fit into society in a traditional way. There's kind of a theory about this with how a lot of autistic people are trans as well, and vice versa. Primarily, a lot of trans people are autistic, um, where perhaps those autistic people just don't have the same like unified vision of like how one person should exist in one body. They're not like adhering to that, and their brain's more likely to differentiate. um it's a possibility. I'm not the most fond of that interpretation, because I think it kind of takes some, I mean, I guess it kind of takes some agency away from those autistic people, but at the same time, it's not generally something you have agency over. But I've kind of lost this sentence. But I do think that it's partly a trauma thing and partly a social thing. It's definitely complicated. On one hand, I would like more researchers to look into it. On the other hand, I really do not, because I do not trust them.
So, yeah, yeah, it's complicated, right? I
Yeah.
hear you on that. Um, Thank you so much for answering that question from your perspective and ideas. It's really interesting to think about these things for me. Maybe being a singlet is a social construct that
Honestly, it kind of
just doesn't
is.
make a lot of sense to autistic people.
You never know.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, let's go to the next question. How do you navigate sensory needs or sensitivities within your system considering the overlap with autistic experiences?
So, as I was saying before, it's a lot of just making sure that people are able to care for their needs if they need them. Some of our system members are more noise sensitive than others, and are more easily overwhelmed just like being in public sometimes. And so we have in our purse, like, which we have on us all the time, noise canceling headphones that we can just like pop in, and we can like, it's very cool. We can adjust on our phone so like just voices filter in, or just everything is filtered out completely as best it can. And I think just having resources like that available, sunglasses as well, we also have that in our purse all the time. And I think having some specific stuffed animals for our system kids to use when they're having some overwhelm. We have emergency lion over there on the couch somewhere. I think just considering both individual needs and overall needs is the most important thing.
For me, when I was learning more about autism and access needs, and also internalized ableism of not
Mm-hmm.
wanting to meet my access needs due to shame or stigma, etc. I learned more and more about that, and that was also really helpful to learn to meet my plural access needs and to even think about that concept of wait a second, there is like an actual need there that we should try to aim to fulfill where possible.
We actually, in our college this semester, we transferred to like proper state school from community college. Um, we found ourselves like getting really overwhelmed just being on campus, being around so many people, being around the horrible fluorescent lights. Like, I've never had an issue with fluorescent lights before, but something about that school, man. Um, and just like noise, being in a loud classroom. We had this one class where videos were being played a lot, and they were so loud, just so loud, where we had that class yesterday, and we were actually feeling physically ill after that class because of the sound overload. um but like you were saying about like advocating for your own needs, for the very first time in our entire lives, we actually like went to the student center and requested disability accommodations. And I think like recognizing that you are disabled in some ways, if you view your autism that way, not everyone does, but we personally to a degree do, because it is debilitating in some ways. And I think finding the strength to like swallow your shame and ask for help and advocate for yourself and put your needs first over other people's needs is important. And in fact, we're going to be trying to do that more next semester, where we're going to try and add on being able to wear like earbuds in class when things get too loud. Um, which will hopefully help. It's not easy to advocate yourself for yourself. We're not fantastic at it, but it's something that I think everyone has to learn eventually.
Yeah, for sure. And taking someone with you can also be really helpful
True.
if you have that option. Um, I hope you get the accommodations you will be requesting from your school.
Thank you.
That sounds really important. Let's talk about the next question. In terms of coping strategies, could you share any that are particularly effective for managing the unique combination of being autistic and plural?
Noise canceling headphones, a quiet place to retreat to, sunglasses. Actually, one thing that I didn't think about until recently is that I have a like big spiky jacket. Um, and that is a big deterrent for people touching me. Like, the spikes aren't really sharp, but like if you hug someone, it does kind of hurt. Having like subtle things like that, subtle cues of like, do not touch me, do not like interfere with my personal space, uh, is really helpful. Sometimes just wearing headphones will get people to like leave you alone, even if they're not like plugged into anything. Or, oh my god, I feel like the oldest woman alive saying plugging in things nowadays. God, Bluetooth connected to anything. And the other thing is just having people around, like you said, bringing someone with you to advocate for yourself, but having someone around who understands your needs and maybe can see signs that you're getting overwhelmed before you do. our partners, both of our partner systems, are fantastic with this, and we do the same back for them. It's an important way to love someone, to be honest, to be able to help them in that way, in like a not codependent way, but in a co helpful way, cohabitative way, whatever the opposite of codependent is.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Could you explore the concept of special interests and how they may play a role within plural systems, especially for autistic systems?
We in the Alexandrite system have a lot of our own little special interests that are unique-ish to individual members, um, and also like activities that are maybe not necessarily special interests but are like unique to that one person, that uh, are unique to that one person. Um, like I have a podcast, like specifically me. Camilla doesn't really play chess anymore, but she used to, and she was really into that. Susan cycles through special interests like twice a year. She's back into Magic the Gathering right now. Oak Oak has knitting, and he has various little like research media projects because we love doing that. Interacting with media is in any ways like our biggest special interest overall, um, and I think encouraging that is really crucial. Like when we were kids, we were always kind of like made fun of or put down or like discouraged away from special interests. Like, nobody wants to hear you talk about that, essentially. Um, and a huge part of healing has been, I want to hear you talk about that. I want you to engage. I want you to engage with the special interests. I want you to have fun. My God, just what a novel concept. Um, and that's especially helpful for our kids and for Susan, who is no longer a kid but is still kind of grouped in there in my mind. But it's been helpful for me too to like unlearn that shame of being passionate about something. Um, I can, even when I was feeling more shame around it, I could. It's not something you can turn off, to be completely honest. But like being unabashedly into something and like being all about that, having people know that this is like your thing, feels good. Uh, there is nothing quite like it, and to have several people in your head have their own things, and to be like, to be interested in it with them, and to help them along with things. um, Susan is a photographer as well, and will sometimes like help her compose shots or like set things up in a way that will um, be useful for her. Sometimes we'll just get her a gift that's film related because that's helpful. Um, just the community that can come from special interests doesn't stop uh, outside the brain.
Mm, that's so good. I think also if you're not autistic or you're not sure, but people in your system have a sort of special interest, they are they hyper focused on
Mhm.
something, you should allow yourself to indulge in it and talk about it and participate in it and
Yeah.
try to find joy in your headmates, finding joy in those things. Um, I think it can be so healing. And I think many of us have that, like autistic or not, in a different, like if you're autistic and you share about your special interests, it's different than any kid talking about something and being told like, hey, not right now, or
Mhm.
right, it's different. But I think so many of our littles, autistic or not, can identify with that pain, of
Yeah.
being like sent away, right, or told not to talk about this about something that caught our interest. So I think can be super healing. And simple thing you can do by yourself. Like you don't have to go to therapy to watch, I don't know, your favorite Disney movie from when you were a kid, right? So it's great, empowering, do it yourself. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Within the context of plurality and autism, we often hear varied experiences. In your system's experience, does autism affect all headmates equally, or are there differences in how it manifests? If one headmate identifies as autistic, does that extend to the whole system's identity, or how do you navigate this?
So, in terms of identity, we just our brain and body, I guess mostly our brain, is autistic. It's just something that is hardwired into us. It's part of how our brain forms and operates. So we don't really have anyone who doesn't either identify as autistic or at least understand that they are autistic. I understand that for some systems, they have individual members who consider themselves autistic and some who do not, which, I get that. But for us, it is like through and through, like you cannot separate any of us from how our brain works. As for individual system members, we it does definitely affect us differently. As I mentioned before, Camilla is pretty face blind. I'm very light sensitive. Some of us are better socially than others, and some are better socially in different situations. Camilla is a go-to person if you need somebody to be like a professional. That is the area where she's most comfortable in, where if she's having like a very friendly casual hangout, she is so like tense and nervous. It's like she doesn't know how to function as a casual person. Sometimes some of us get super anxious and don't know how to be in a professional mindset and how to interact with people in that way. Our therapist, in the letter that she wrote for us for a trans thing last year, she said that we leverage our dissociation to our benefit, something along those lines. And I think that is a way that we like leverage our plurality to our benefit, where we know that like in this situation, this person isn't going to do well, but this person will do fantastically. Um, and just remembering that really in that way, just general plurality tips and autistic plurality tips are kind of one and the same. Just recognize that some of you have different strengths and weaknesses than others.
Thank you so much for sharing about this. It's an interesting thought, and it's different for everyone, but it's interesting to hear how it is for you all. Thank you. One message of hope or empowerment would you like to share with autistic systems who might be struggling to understand or embrace their plurality?
It's gonna be okay. Like it may be difficult right now. Stuff was really difficult for us in the first year, especially of us being plural. Like 5 years ago now, we passed that anniversary recently. It is hard to adjust to a new way of thinking about yourself, thinking about yourselves, and to suddenly have to manage a new aspect of your life actively or like newly actively manage it. We always see it as what's called a J curve, where this kind of a thing in like the tech world, where when you introduce a new technology to like an office, let's say, productivity goes down for a while and then it goes way up when people like because you're taking the time to learn and it's difficult, more difficult than it was before, and then you get good at it. And all of a sudden things are fantastic. Like we dropped out of school, dropped out of college in 2014, 5 years before discovering our plurality. And we just couldn't do school then. but now we definitely can, and it's in part, in a large part, due to us being able to work together in that way. We divvy up classes and things, and we know when to tap out and when to like switch who is dealing with a certain thing. You know, the message of like it gets better can be like super generic and really not mean anything. But I think specifically you're gonna be okay at some point. I know stuff probably sucks right now if you're really like needing this sort of message, but you will find people who accept you in some degree, singlet or not. You're going to find a safe place to live and be openly plural. We did eventually. You're going to be able to function better. Um, it might be only a little bit better, but a little bit better is still better. And I think just going easy on yourself and recognizing that like small progress is progress, and taking one step back doesn't mean you can't take another step forward is important. Just hang in there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think if you're autistic and you find out you're plural, it's a great community to join because there are so many other
Yeah,
autistic people to hang out with who will like understand your experience and validate that and like welcome you. So you know there are worse communities to have to join when you discover things about yourself than the plural community.
definitely.
Are there any other things you want to share with our audience today, like something that you've been thinking about maybe regarding this topic?
I guess just be nice to each other. You
Hmm.
know, like I over the last 5 years of being in this community, I've become so sick and tired of the vitriol that people spit at each other. It kind of ties back into like the autistic understanding of like try to remember that this other person is another person. They don't think the same as you necessarily. I think just try and remember that a person that you're talking to on another side of the screen is another person. And even if you don't get along with them, there are systems that we don't get along with. Like it's nothing about them being plural or whatever. It's just we don't mesh. Um, I think just knowing when not to interact as well is easy. Uh, get off of Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but I've severely limited it. That's the only other thing I can really say. Just find something better to do than be on Twitter. It's designed to make you angry. Find a separate find a community of plural people and then just move from Twitter to like Discord or something. That'll help your mental health a bunch. So be nice to each other. Don't go on Twitter.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much. Um, we've been through a lot as a community in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and before that as well. So
The last,
I
the last 50, 60, 120 years.
I wasn't there yet back then, but I was there 10 years ago. It's been quite something over the last 10 years, and I'm so glad that now we have like events
Hmm.
like this, and we can have like these conversations about even the overlap with plurality and other identities, like being autistic. Um,
Yeah. There's so much more out there just for like resources and things than when we discovered our own plurality
mhm.
just 5 years ago. Like 5 years is a long time, but it's really not that long of a time. Like 2019. And there's so much more now. So many good creators putting out good messages and like helping people a lot. So many more plural positivity world conference talks to go and look at. I think there was only like one or two uh, years or events worth um, when we first discovered, and they were helpful, but it's like we continuously wanted more. There's more. Go find more. It's fantastic.
PPWC was actually founded in 2019, so it
There we
was
go.
the very first conference year uh, for us. Yeah,
It was a good
that's
one.
awesome. Thank you so much, Alexandrite System, for answering my interview questions and participating in this session for PPWC. We really appreciate it. It's always a joy to talk with y'all about these topics, and we can't thank you enough for participating yet again at another conference of ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's a joy to be part of PPWC after being a fan for so long.